So when you're playing catch in baseball and you throw a line drive and you hold your mitt out, so hopefully there's a time in catch where it hits a sweet spot where it's like, I didn't do it right. Like that, like, I'm going to throw you the ball, line drive, and I really hope you catch it and take it home with you because it's so pivotal. Everybody knows, why is this night different than all the nights? Passover, because we eat at 10 o'clock, and we say a lot of prayers we don't understand. That's why this night is different than all the nights. But really, it's a pivotal moment, and I'm going to explain why it's the most celebrated holiday amongst the Jewish people. So here we have a convergence of history and psychology. On one hand, it's a historical thing. Over 3,600 years ago, we, the Jewish people, were slaves in Egypt, and we left. And when we celebrate that, we're connecting to that moment. Historical. And yet, it's also psychological, that there's a concept of being enslaved and going out of slavery. Now, this moment of going out of slavery is not a once-a-year commemoration. It's an everyday realization. Every day, in the morning and at night, we are commanded to remember that we left Egypt. Part of the Shema, when you say Shema, I believe that God is God and God is one. Part of that is I believe God took us out of Egypt. It's integral amongst us as the Jewish people, morning and night. So therefore, we can legitimately ask the question, why is this night different than all other nights? Every night we mention the going out of Egypt. Why is this night any different? But more importantly, what really, in our lives day to day, you're thinking morning and night, we were slaves, now we're out? How does that historical fact factor in to our day-to-day lives? How do I relate to something that I've not experienced, and yet I have to view myself as if I left Egypt, as if I left that realm of slavery? I hear the history and the importance of the history. I don't understand how it enters into the psychology that every day I have to remember that I left Egypt. And on Passover night, I have to feel that I left myself from the reality of Egypt. What is it? And how do we even factor in slavery? That's a bad thing. Why were we enslaved? How do I view this in a worldview? If I view the world as having an order, how do I fit the enslavement of the Jewish people into my perspective of history and my perspective of the universe? So the answer is that everything is developmental. Everything is incremental. No human being grows suddenly, starts with a tiny seed and becomes 40 billion cells. Every human being has slow developmental stages. What's true by an individual is true by a nation. Abraham, in a time period of darkness, came to the realization there are not multiple gods, everything is connected as one. There is a quantum entanglement in the universe that every cell in the world is at one. And God promises to him, those who bless you, I will bless. Those who curse you, I will curse. A promise that has lived out throughout history. And he says, I will make you a great nation, but your children will be enslaved in Egypt and I will take them out with miracles. Why? Why does there have to be this development of a Jewish people, 70 that go down to Egypt, and a great amount of people going out? Why do we have to go through this reality of enslavement? Abraham realized there's oneness in the universe. I will make you a great nation. Let's go straight to the chase. Let's go right to the good part. Why is this concept of enslavement? So the concept is that we all have to realize that all the world runs on one scientific axiom, which is there's got to be darkness before there is light. Jewish day starts at night. When does the Sabbath start? Friday night. It starts with darkness and then it goes to light. All human existence in our relationship to happiness, it comes out of a time period of sadness. It's the differential between darkness and light that is the axiom upon which all human experience is based upon. We're always in a darkness and then we're going to light. There's to be a people called the Jewish people. Nobody argues with that. Christianity doesn't argue that the Jews were not enslaved in Egypt. Islam doesn't argue with that. There was a formation of a nation, the Jewish people, who went down to Egypt, the greatest power on earth, helped them out, and we assimilated, but we were eventually enslaved. Now, part of enslavement is that you create a bond with each other and you are cognizant of the oppression and what's wrong. When you know what's wrong, you will be devoted to what's right. The group experience of slavery wasn't just a hassle that got in the way of our careers. It shaped us as a group of humans. The deeper commentators say that Egypt were the ultimate opposite of the essence of the Jewish people. They were people that were great and smart in the physical part, but they had no soul. A multitude of gods, tremendously promiscuous. They did not have what it takes to be spiritual. They had greatness and civilization and built pyramids, but they did not have that spirituality. So when we were in Egypt, it was not just the physical pain that we were experiencing. It was the spiritual pain of the void of connectivity. We experienced two pains. Physical pain, I don't want to do backbreaking work. Spiritual pain, I want to connect. The yearning for the connection was the darkness, and the leaving of Egypt was the light. That when we left that with great miracles, we saw that everything that we were oppressed by is really nothing. Let me explain that. Everything we were oppressed by, the physical, backbreaking work, or the physical of not being connected to the spiritual, it's all in the hands of God. There's a flicker, a split second in a person's brain when you realize really all of life is an illusion and really everything is ultimately God. Everyone's had experiences. Oh, I just had a dream. I was thinking about you. And then you see that person the next day. That's weird. Like, we're all connected. How did that happen? We have these flashes that everything that we think oppresses us is really nothing, is really not there. And when we had that magical communal experience, it was etched into our brains that the world is one and the world is being run. It was etched forever. Now, that was 3,600 years ago and more. What does that have to do with us now? So we have a Seder and we get together, and the form of the Seder is question and answer. The Torah says, if your child will ask, you will tell them. Some say, well, that's only if your child asks. Then the answer is no, you have to create a scenario in which your child will ask. And that's why the first part of the Haggadah is Manish Tana. You're asking a question. Why? Why are we evoking this concept of question, answer, question, answer? Here's the deepest part, the ball I want to throw right to you, is that there are many forms of conversation. There's many forms of getting together. There's a deep experiential form of connecting in which you ask a question and you get an answer. And you go back and forth. The greatest, if you want to hear about somebody, listen to an interview of them, going back and forth. But if you want to experience something, so when you, and God willing, you have children, your children ask you a question and then you give them an answer, you're going through an experiential moment in which you're trying to instill in them, this is reality. The concept that we do, where we do different things because we want our children to ask. Why do you want our children to ask? Some people say that you do not fulfill the mitzvah of Seder unless somebody asks a question. If your child could ask a question, have them ask. If somebody at the table could ask, have them ask. Even if you're by yourself, you should ask yourself a question and speak it out, because when you verbalize it, it becomes experiential. But the main focus is children, that we all need to pass it on. The pivotal reality of Passover is literally that we pass over this experience of Egypt. And how do we do that? by evoking questions. So when we want to give over, the most important thing is we will all one day not be alive, and everybody here has an obligation to pass it on. Well, when's the moment that you pass it on, that you spurn out of that? It's centered in Passover. The one day a year where you have an experiential thing, 364 days out of the year, you can, in your brain, remember we were in Egypt. You can just think about it. You don't have to tell over stories and have a back and forth. One day out of the year, you have to get together with people and have a back and forth. Come on, ask a question. Look at the Haggadah. Think of something, and I'll answer it. Why? Why can't we just say it straight? Let's get right to the meal. Just email it to me. Why do I need this? No, because we need to be in the zone of question-answer. The Talmud says, I learned a lot from my rabbis, more from my friends, and the most from my students. If you want to know something, teach it. If you want to know something, teach it. You will learn the most from giving it over than you will do it from receiving it. Because when you give over information, it becomes for you experiential. So we hope when we gather the family together, the goal is that you want your children to ask you questions so that you can give answers. Who's gaining? You're gaining. Having your child ask a question is so that you can give the answer, so that you can have that experience. But it turns out that this experiential is generational. This experiential concept called the Passover Seder, where you're giving over this information, is generational. This is how we are formed as a people. The one gathering of the tribes, the one ingathering of all the Jewish people together happens on Passover night. This is the moment that we huddle and we say, this is who we are as a people. This is how we are formed. This is our bedrock. This is our foundation. So it means that when you look at being Jewish in terms of 21st century, in terms of 20th century, in terms of the past millennium, it's ridiculous. You're looking at cultural realities. You're not looking to the core. Who are we as a people? The descendants of Abraham who were enslaved in Egypt, which formed us as a people and made us ready now to leave and to receive the Torah and to bring light unto the world. But we could never have been a light unto the nations unless we experience the reality of oppression. Oppression not just physically, but oppression on a spiritual level. The hunger creates the connection to the food. The darkness creates the yearning for the light. And we all, as a people, had to experience that so that we can be holders of the light. But without that darkness, we can't have it. But most importantly, unless we huddle once a year and go and pass it on to the next generation and pass it to ourselves experientially, then we will never fully be centered. Just like if a person goes to a chiropractor, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work, but for 1 minute you feel your posture is good. This is my posture, I'm standing up straight. This is the way a human being should be. So to Passover night, in the ideal form, you walk out of there, I remember what the Jewish people are. I remember who we are. I remember what our mission is. I am clear about our foundation. So now the rest of the 364 days of the year, every time I say Shema, I will also remember Egypt. But I'll just remember it. But I'm living off the experience. Each person has to view themselves that they left Egypt on the night of Passover and in our own personal ways as well. Everybody experiences slavery. Slavery means that I have a soul that wants to do something, but my body doesn't let me. There's not a person that doesn't, the whole concept of the body, of the Yetzer Hara, of the negative inclination is, it enslaves you. I so badly want to get up early and do something good and do learning. But I keep hitting snooze. It's not just that I'm lazy, I'm enslaved. That this habit that I've formed of snoozing, whoever invented that is a genius and yet evil at the same time, is that it's like that in my brain, the best sleep happens during snooze, but I don't really think it's true. But that whole concept of just like, please, 5 more minutes. And some guy said, yeah, you know what, why don't you do that? Just give you 5 minutes of snooze. And the answer is, obviously, you can snooze every day and have a reason why today I'm tired. Today I need to sleep. And every day you will miss what you wanted to do. So what's true? You're a slave. You are a slave to your habits. And you need to bust out of that. You need freedom. Happiness is freedom. Freedom means I was held down and now I am free. When we talk about connectivity to spirituality, it's translated in English as freedom. You feel good? What does it mean you feel good? You feel free. But freedom presupposes that beforehand you were enslaved. There's no freedom without slavery. There's no goodness without having negative. There's no light without darkness. The holiday of Passover is a holiday of freedom that we hope to take with us and carry every day and say, I left Egypt so I won't be slaved. I can overcome what's holding me back. The end. Thank you guys. Any questions? You go.
Yeah, so it seems like we want to pass it down to our kids. So if there aren't any kids around, let's say just a bunch of old people in a nursing home, how can we make the statement that?
So everyone, the Talmud says, you would think it just because it says when your child asks you, you think only if your child asks you. If he doesn't ask you, you don't have to say it. Right. It says no, even if 2 great scholars are in the room, they have to ask each other. So there's no such thing. All the commentators say child, normally whenever you see the word child, it always means student. It's an important thing. When it says V'shinan tam levanecha, you should teach your children, it means your students. It means we're all teachers. It doesn't matter what your actual job is. Every person's obligated to be a teacher. But in any scenario, be it a nursing home, which is awesome because they do it a day before and at 5 o'clock, I'm like, ooh, this is good. Wish I could do that with my relatives. Be like, come on over a day early. We'll make it early. In the old age home, they don't know that. Yeah, I think today's Passover. But yeah, you get away with it. And you see Bernice, be like, come on, ask me a question. Bernice, well, what's interesting? What's different about Passover? Come on, throw it to me. But what I mean is that in a psychological thing, I might talk publicly, but I'm very shy. But I'm never shy to answer a question. If I'm sitting with someone, I'm not just going to just talk. But I would like to kick it back and forth. Someone asks me a question, here's an answer. We'll go back and forth. The whole Jewish thing, all Talmud is question, answer, question, answer. People always think that Jewish custom to answer a question with a question. It's not a Jewish custom. It is a Jewish custom, and on a deeper level, it's saying all of conversation is question answer. So, ooh, you asked me this question? Let me bring it one step further, and back and forth. So it's really our modus operandi is sometimes it's uncomfortable, but if I'm sitting at a wedding, I'm just not going to comment on the weather. You have I'll ask you a question. You ask me a question. That's how we kick it back and forth. So it doesn't mean you need children. So you have to actually say something at the Passover Seder. Can't get away with it. I was to me, I'm okay, you have an uncle, let them do it. Run through it, let's just eat. You have to say something. Read part of the Haggadah. You go.
I've never been at a Seder where there was an open forum for new questions. It's always let's get through, But is it supposed to be like
that? That's actually the way it is.
People are supposed to ask additional questions other than the forum?
Even to add on. And let's say, so a real Passover Seder is where it's a constant interruption. I know someone that has an old Haggadah from about 300 years ago, and it was printed in Prague. And this Haggadah has in it extra margins on the side of the Haggadah. And the person who owned that, every year he would write down after Passover the other questions that they would add, that were added, and how he answered them. So you have a record of the development of this person's family throughout his Haggadah. So that's the real thing. Unfortunately, you have to break on through to the other side of cultural Judaism where it's okay, here we are, here's the Seder mints. I have to go, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I have work. And when you have little kids, it's great because I've got to put them to sleep. It's bedtime. Just little kids will get you out of everything. You could even not come to the Seder. I was going to come, but he's not feeling well. But the concept is, no. One night a year, and many people that I know that really have real Seders, they stay up really late at night. Just going at it, back and forth. And that's the goal. Running through it doesn't do it. And you don't have to say it in Hebrew. all the Talmudic commentators say that if your family doesn't understand it, then it's not worth its weight in anything. If you're okay, and you're like, die, I know Hebrew. I'm like, who's Enu, and why do you want him to die? That's terrible. Die, I would get totally turned off by that. No, the concept is say it in English or whatever language you understand. If you don't understand, it's not worth it. And as we said many times, if you don't understand, you can't pass it on. So understanding is the key. All right, happy Passover.